Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review 2001, A Space Odyssey. So, I went into this movie and I wanted to just review it because honestly, I don't know, you always kind of hear about a film, and then also, a lot of times, Interstellar is compared to this movie, and basically, Interstellar is a movie about Matthew McConaughey crying during some video of his daughter. Really, that's what the movie's about? That's the only thing people care about. I've seen every bit of that Interstellar movie, but that's, the only scene people care about. It's just Matthew just, and the one girl, and every girl that ever watches this movie, because I watch the reactions, are like, oh, I'm crying too. Anyway, so 2001 A Space Odyssey. What the heck is this movie about? Well, a lot of people would say that this movie is boring, and I honestly could not fight them with that. To just say, oh no, you know how, honestly, every space movie is a boring film. If there's ever a really exciting, space movie, well, give Star Wars, but, you have to also kind of wait around for the ship to just kind of lazily go to the left for 10 minutes of screen. It's oh, is it there yet? Do we got it? That's every one of these space movies. There's always this ship coming into the screen, and it takes forever. Did we get the scene yet? What Little Last Crevice? That's every space movie you've ever seen in your life, in all honesty. But so 2001 A Space Odyssey, what is this about in a very cryptic sense for people to understand what the heck that this is? And more than likely, I'm not going to do the best job at it, but I'm going to try my best to eventually get to the point of acid trip and just be yeah, this part just, whoa. It just went wonky, it went wild, and then we go to this spot, which makes no sense, but we're going to break it down as best as possible anyways, because if people have seen this movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. I would say that this movie, there's parts of this movie I can enjoy, but, there's the long trickle of, thing going in front of scene, and you're just wow, I want 30 more of those. Could we get 30 more of those? That's what this movie kind of is. It's a very slow crawl movie that, at the end of the day, I could finally say that I've seen. Because I didn't understand what the whole thing was about how. And, to me, in my freaking mind, while I was just listening to how, I was just consistently would you like to play a game? Because freaking that's what I was thinking. Are we going to have Death Con fun in here? What's going to go on next? How is the world going to just plooey? Because everybody's going to shoot nukes at one another. Is that what this movie's about? No? Oh, that sucks. I was hoping for Earth destruction, but whatever. I guess we just have to deal with people being in hibernation for X amount of time in this movie for whatever bizarrish reason. But anyways, so this kind of reminds me of the Norman Reedus movie Air. That's what it kind of feels like most of this movie is. If you've never seen Air, oh my god, are you missing out? Man, is that a really good movie. Norman Reedus, the main thing that comes out of the trailer is you don't have any air, and then DeJaiman is just kind of walking around trying to figure out what the heck to do through a bulk of the movie. It's great. If you've never seen the Norman Reedus movie Air, check it out. I enjoyed it. So, what is this movie about? So, besides its slow crawl mentality, so the very beginning of this is to show apes. So we just had a ton of people in costumes that are all disguised as apes during a portion of this movie. And I'm just okay. Then eventually we have some astronomical science guy who I guess is affiliated with the government going into space just so that way he can do this meeting. And everybody's talking about well, hey, Is there a pandemic going on? Coincidence, I guess. For 2001, I guess they kind of skipped a freaking like, but they talked about this pandemic that happens in this movie, and so we end up finding out that there's something about that pandemic, and we'll get to that. So what eventually happens, and the more I think important thing that ends up happening is we have these astronauts that are starting to think that their AI in their ship is kind of doing some false calculations, and then it's like, maybe we should just just pull the plug. You know what I mean? But yeah, so now we have man against machine, and we have to forcibly have an astronaut try and outsmart an AI. And really, it actually wasn't all that hard. Really, it just wasn't all that hard. But then, bizarrely, we all of a sudden get this acid trip into this movie, and then we get these scenes that make no sense, and then the movie just bizarrely ends in an odd, obscure way, which I will talk about when we get into all the spoiler stuff. So, like, really, a 2 hour and 25-minute movie, we're just kind of like, what? But, like, I'll try in my best way to explain some things that happen in this movie. And then we're going to kind of, as much as possible, kind of quickly get through the more important chunks of this film, I think, rather than spending so much time in one spot and so on and so forth. So, speaking of spots, I think it's about that time to go into that double 5 time territory, because I think it's that coveted time, yet again, to go on into space to give you spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time to spoil this movie. So, beginning of movie, we have a bunch of people that are dressed up as apes, obviously. Man, I was just waiting for the Charlton Heston to be like, "You blew it up! Damn you!" But no. This is like the beginning of time. So, in the beginning of time, we have these apes who figure out how to use bones, like these bones that are just laying around. And so one ape just has this thing of a bone and just beats the death out of some other ape. And then all of a sudden we just have this monolith thing that appears. That's what this like blackened brick thing is to be called. It's like a monolith. And I'm like, okay, whatever that is. Like, I know a lot of people will go through this entire movie and explain everything to me, which I know that's coming, so that's okay if you want to do that. But I probably won't have a response for it, because I'm just like, this movie is weird, but it's okay if you want to explain. Go ahead, maybe someone else who doesn't know about monoliths and all this goofy stuff, because I guess monoliths are to arrive when there's a event that is to happen, that is to be like a key part of life or a key like thing going on, because we end up getting this second monolith thing that ends up appearing supposedly on Jupiter's moon. But bizarrely, we have some signal that ends up happening during them arriving on Jupiter's moon. And all of a sudden, like, these people are getting, like, their ears, they're like, oh my god, that sound. Like, there's this blaring sound that ends up coming into Jupiter's moon. It's so weird, and it's so, like, okay, I'm trying to figure things out here, but it's... So, but that happens somewhere later in between the whole, like, the scientist astronomer guy makes his way to this this meeting, and we'll get to that. So, we have this we have this really cool moment where like we have these people who have like Velcro shoes or something on, or they have like grip shoes that are just kind of like, we have this one airplane moment where this guy has his like pen floating in the air to, I guess, showcase that this is like a zero gravity like plane to make his way to this space dock place. So this woman is giving this guy back his pen in his pocket, and then she's just walking on. I'm like, dude, that's gotta be some like really annoying, like, that you have to like really grip your feet, or otherwise you're gonna be going flying. I better be going flying. Woo! I'm gonna be like Kermit the Frog whenever he gets really upset or has to run really fast, where his hands like look like. Anyways, but yeah, there's spots where we bizarrely have like waitresses who are giving people like food, and man is that cool. I'll hopefully I'll get to that, because that looks like the whole food part of this movie looks really cool. We have one spot where like a waitress is bizarrely like walking in a circle form. I'm just like, man, that looks cool, where the waitress is like at one spot and then she like goes 100, like almost like freaking 180, and then walks into the one spot to give the pilots their food. Pretty cool spot. Like, let's let's talk about the food. Let's talk about the food in the movie. So the one waitress bizarrely has like, people who are given food in this one spot are having to like have these weird like milk carton like food. It's weird. Like, it's so, and somebody's like sipping it from a straw from these bizarre milk cartons that are on these trays, but they're not like milk cartons set up this way. It's like milk cartons set up that way. It's so interesting. I was like, wow, that looks really cool. And we also have a spot like later on when we have the astronauts that I think are probably like, it looks like their food is like military food. That's what it looks like to me. It looks like crap. Like, it looks like you're just eating this weird like thing that like looks like lasagna or something, but like it's like, I don't know, it's so like, it looks like somebody's eating like a green brick that, or green, or it looks like a Minecraft like kind of food that they're eating. It looks so weird. If you've ever seen Minecraft, and if you don't know what Minecraft is, go ahead and check out any game, millions of games that YouTube has. You can see how like there's like the setup of their food just looks so weird, but I guess it's like a military kind of food. So I can just be like, oh, so that's like MRNs or whatever they're called. Or whatever the military food's called. I know an episode, there's an episode of Community, a Halloween episode, where there's military food that gets put into the party, and then that creates zombies, and so like and they use military food in that episode, so like I know like where I can get a reference of what food that is. Anyways, moving on. So we have this guy who is to go and do this press conference, or do this kind of meeting with all these officials. And so he's going and doing some video message to tell his daughter happy birthday. And I guess the mother isn't home. So like it's like, hey, like, go and have a great birthday tomorrow. Like, hopefully you're going to love it, and blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, so supposedly, I guess that call cost like $1.70. Like, am I right about that, or is that 170? Like, you would think that'd be like a really expensive call, but I guess I don't know, whatever. Like, maybe money has no significance in this distant whatever time. So, so let's get to names, because so we have Dr. Floyd, who is to go, and that's the guy who I was talking about, who ends up going to these kind of like these people that are eventually gonna like talk to him about like what's kind of going on. We have a guy who's kind of questioning about the pandemic that is going on with Dr. Floyd, and Dr. Floyd's just like, hey man, like it's not really a problem. If anything, just kind of like go about your day kind of thing. And so like trying to put him at ease and everything like that. So Dr. Floyd is to eventually go to this meeting and eventually mention that the whole pandemic thing was just some kind of cover-up story, or was just some kind of cover story for what's actually going on. And it's like, okay, that seems weird. And so we start having people like start asking, it's like, well, hey, like how far should we go about this whole cover-up thing? Like how far should we like have this kind of story? So Dr. Floyd eventually like talks about this, goes in depth about it, whatever. Like all this stuff is just like seemingly not important enough for me. I think probably this story was to probably cover up the whole like Jupiter moon situation about the whole monolith, and or probably also like it was probably also to cover up that they actually found life on another part of space, because that's what eventually trickles down in this movie. So so let's push on to the story of the astronauts, the two astronauts who is to be Dr. Dave Bowman and Dr. Frank Poole. So we have these two astronauts, and I guess the rest of these astronauts that are on these ships, that are on the ship, is in hibernation. And so it seems we end up finding out these people in this hibernation only breathe 1 minute of a day or something, 1 minute of a certain time period. And I'm just like, well, if they're frozen, like, are they, like, shouldn't they not be doing anything whatsoever? Like, but I guess you have to keep the body preserved. I don't know how freezing works, but like we have movies like Forever Young and like the Mel Gibson movie where like we had a guy who was like frozen forever for years, but what do I know, right? Winter Soldier also frozen for periods of time, but what do I know? So so both of these astronauts are going and eating their brick food. They look so weird. What's, man, like, look at the green stuff that they end up eating, and I'm just like, I'm sure that's probably broccoli, but that's just like, nah. You know what? Like, I don't know. It also looks like slime to me, and I just don't know if I could eat slime just like that. But like, yeah. Plus, the forks look weird. It looks like they have like the weirdest looking forks in my life. Like, you can't get some good looking forks in space? What kind of future is this? So so eventually we have this kind of report, like explaining everything about all the other like pilots going into hibernation. And so what ends up happening is that both the doctors are kind of going through and kind of seeing all these tests being run, and so they're starting to question the accuracy of certain kind of tests or certain kind of calculations, and they're starting to question things, so immediately they start to go to HAL 9000, or just HAL for short. So they end up asking Hal, it's like, hey buddy, hey Hal, like, Hal Jordan, Green Lantern? No. Anyways, so Hal is to be asked, it's like, well, here's the thing. So why are these like calculations seemingly incorrect? Has there ever been an incorrect like thing before? And Hal was like, no, there has never been an incorrect thing before, Dave. Isn't that great? And so, like, we have both Dave and Frank. They're just like, yeah, I think there's something not quite right about this Hal, but I don't want to say it to his face because, like, but there's something just fishy that doesn't seem quite right about the calculations about things. I'm just starting to question this Hal guy. So we all of a sudden have both Dave and Frank who end up going into the little, like, I guess I would call it escape pod, but I know there's an exact term for this thing. So both Dave and Frank go into this little escape pod thing, and so they end up going into this thing, and so they ask Hal if Hal can hear them, and they can't. And so both Dave and Frank are just saying, like, you know what? Like, I think that Hal is, like, not doing something correctly. Like, I think there's something wrong with him, and I think we probably need to disconnect him. Like, I think we need to... I think we need to turn him off. Like, I think we need to unhook him or whatever. And so these guys are kind of like, at first we have Dave who's just like, well, like, maybe we can give him the benefit of the doubt. And it's just like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think that he's just messing up. And so it's just like, yeah, maybe you're right. Like, but, like, maybe we'll just wait a little longer to just kind of see what happens. And so while these guys are talking about Hal is just like, you know what? Like, I want to freaking know what they're saying. And so Hal, all of a sudden, is to be able to see both of these characters' lips moving, and Hal just naturally assumes, like, they're going to want to disconnect me. They're going to want to just take me out. I need to kill both of them because I no longer like Frank or Dave. I just hate both of them now. I don't know why. I guess if it's them versus me, it's gonna be them. So Frank, or Dr. Frank Poole, just goes out of his way to go outside. And this guy ends up getting hurt. And so that leads him just kind of flying in the air, just like repetitiously, just going in circles and just having a good time. And so Dr. Dave, let's go with Dave. Let's just go with straight up Dave. So Dave is deciding, like, hey, like, why wasn't there, like, an alarm or something to letting me know that this guy is just floating off into the sky? And Hal's like, oh, I'm sorry, Dave. And so, like, I'm paraphrasing a lot here. We're doing something weird and funny here. So Dave is just like, well, okay, well, Dave doesn't have his helmet on. His helmet thing. This guy, no helmet. And so he just goes out there and retrieves Frank and, like, grabs him with these weird, like grabber things on this little escape pod ship thing. And so Dave is making his way back to the spot to eventually dock this ship. And so Dave is like, hey, Hal, could you let me in? Could you let me in there, buddy? And Hal's like, I'm sorry, Dave. I can't do that, Dave. And Hal's like, or Dave's like, wait, what? What, Hal? Like, I thought we were friends. Like, I was going to ask you to my wedding. Like, I don't know who I'm going to marry because there's not really much anybody left on the ship. But, like, Hal, I thought we were friends. Like, I thought we were friends, Hal. That's not what happens here. It's I'm trying to go in a much more funnier route. So Hal is just like, I'm sorry, Dave, but I know that you and Frank were conspiring to get rid of me, Dave. I know. I saw your voice. I saw your mouth moving. Like, I couldn't hear you, but I could see your mouth moving, Godzilla style. And so Dave was like, well, you know I can, like, go and open this hatch and get back into here. Like, you know I can do that, right? And Hal is just like, well, you know what? You also forgot your thing called a helmet. So good luck doing that. And so Dave is like, okay, motherfucker. Okay, we're doing this then. Me and you, bro. Tango a tango. So Dave bizarrely just lets freaking, like, Frank just, like, sift onto the wind. Or, technically, this is space, so sift onto space where no one can hear you scream. And, like, I don't know if that guy is just dead forever, or, like, really just Dave just gave up on Frank. I don't know what happened. Maybe he got the body back? I don't know. But, anyways, so he's probably just dead anyways, so, like, what's the point of trying to, like, toss his dead carcass back into the ship? He's probably gonna be dead anyways. It's true. So what ends up happening is, so Dave used these little, like grabber things on this escape pod thing to open the one door. And so, of course, like, he can't easily just maneuver between escape pod and door. So he ends up turning the thing so like, the back door is right by this door. And so Dave quickly opens this door up and gets shot out of this thing into this room. And so now Dave has to hold his breath and try to quickly... and here's the goofy thing. Like, sometimes in space movies, like, if skin is in space, your face is frozen. Your face, like, freezes in space. Is that not going to happen here? Or are we just going to have it where, like, Dave is just, like, hold his breath and he'll be fine? Story. So I don't know how, like, skin actually works in outer space, but, like, I've seen a lot of things where people will just freaking, take off one part of their space outfit and their hand froze. Like, I saw that on, the one episode of Black Mirror where the girl freaking, like, breaks her arm off so that way she can go and chuck it and try and get back on her spaceship. Like, and that kind of felt like a ripoff of Gravity to me, but to each their own. So, I think the episode was jokingly called, like, I Need a Hand or something, or Do You Need a Hand, or some goofy thing like that. So, anyways, so Dave goes right after he is to get back into the spaceship. Dave goes on and just starts, like, going to this one goofy looking room with all these, like, memory banks. And so Dave just starts pulling things out and continues to try to disconnect Hal, where Hal is continued to talk during this, and Hal is to mention, like, Dave, I can start to feel my memory going, Dave. Dave, like, don't disconnect me. Like, don't take me out. Don't kill me, Dave. Like, look at all the fun that we had, Dave, you and I, you know? To where all of a sudden we just have, like, Hal just starting to sing this song, like, this old song, like, give me a day for two. And then we just have it, like, the more and more that Dave continues to pull out, we just have this, and to where it, like, you can't understand what Hal is even saying. It's like, and, like, that's what all they're just saying in here. And so all of a sudden we just have this video up on this screen where we have this one guy who's to mention that there is to be life on this other planet. And so Dave is like, well, I'm going to go and figure out where the heck that other life is. So we have Dave who ends up taking this escape pod and going off into the outer reaches of space, because we start to see these weird and wild freaking colors of all these things and all this stuff that just continues to just keep hitting us and hitting us with all these weird and wild colors. And I'm just like, what is going on in this movie? I'm just like, whoa. Like, no, everyone get your out. You know what I mean? Like, somebody's gonna be like, what's going on? I don't know. If anything, I ever felt like so like, what is even going on in here? Like, we have that interstellar moment where like Matthew McConaughey is now going through the fabric of time to go and like drop a book or do all these number of things that happened supposedly during some portion of thing where like Matthew is trying to give clues to help people understand where he is, but it doesn't quite work that way. So like it's quasi similar to that, but it's not that. It's just Dave is continuing to go into this fabric of space, and he's seeing all these hippy dippy whippy colors that are just so eventually we just land to Dave continuing to go into space, so much so that he eventually just lands into this room, bizarrely. This room that is to be this kind of like old-fashioned kind of like fancy, stylish like room. And so all of a sudden we have Dave who ends up getting out of his pod into this room. And so all of a sudden we seemingly have Dave who is starting to age while he's in this room, or we are to maybe naturally assume that time is passing fairly quickly here. I am not quite sure about the breakdown of this room, but or maybe Dave has just been here for a very long time, or maybe it took him for frickin' ever to get to where this spot is. So Dave is to be this old elderly man, and so what ends up happening is Dave ends up taking off his jumpsuit, and I guess he can breathe in this environment. So that's great. Thumbs up. So all of a sudden, just Dave just starts to live like what is to be the rest of his life, however short it is, in this room, and like we never see him eat, we never see him drink anything. Maybe he's eating and drinking. I don't want to know. I don't want to speculate. So maybe he's eating the bed sheets. I don't know. I don't think they gave him food. There's not one alien that's saying like E.T. phone home in this spot. We just see Dave who's just by himself, and then he just like sleeps in this bed, and then all of a sudden he just dies. He just dies. He's like, I'm an old man and I'm gonna die right now. Oh, it sucks, I'm sure. But so what happens next after Dave is supposedly to die is, and I try to like look this up to understand what Dave eventually becomes. So Dave is to die, but then bizarrely he is to be reincarnated or reborn as this like this star child or this other being of sorts, and he ends up just starting to float on back to Earth. And that's the way that this movie just ends, with floating on baby alien child thing just floating its way back to Earth. And I know everybody and their brother is just going to come onto this section and explain the crap out of this movie, because I'm dumb. Because I am. And that's okay. But anyways, like I know a lot of people are just like, that's not actually what that was. This is my version of what I think it was. Like, everybody has their conspiracies and everybody has their thoughts and whatever, and they're like, well, I saw the featurette of this movie, and the director had said that this was this, and it was good. And I was like, okay, all right. Like, the writer of this movie said that this thing was that thing, and this thing. I'm like, okay, sure. Great. Like, I'm not making fun of anybody that's gonna leave a comment. Please don't like dislike this video just because I made fun of somebody of how they'll like describe something or whatever. I'm just having fun with this. But with that said, I think I'm gonna get out of here. Like, there is something about this movie. Like, there is some like, okay, I finally understand the whole like Hal thing. I finally understand the whole like why somebody would have gone into this movie, because it feels like a big film. You gotta love that music though, in some spots where it's like burn, 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 burn. Like they picked the perfect freaking music to accompany these like slow moving parts in this film. And you gotta imagine probably any of this soundtrack is probably played during any parts of like people's lives that are still to this day like burn, 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 burn. Freaking like sweet, right? But yeah, so I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.